Hello, in this video I want to tell you a bizarre story of Tito and Dragi Katanic. He was an average worker that lost his job at a paper factory in Kraljevo. Why is this story important? It tells us a lot about communism and about totalitarian systems and generally about Tito's cult of personality. So all communist systems in Eastern Europe legitimized their rule by primarily two things. Number one, the fact that they defeated fascism, and number two, the fact that they provided a better life for the working class. After all, communism was there just to help the little guy, to give him better life. And in many aspects, yes, Yugoslav communism did provide better working conditions than the cruel capitalism of the Yugoslav monarchy, where you didn't have the right to have a vacation or universal healthcare, or, for example, you could be fired very easily. While in communism, for a long time at least, it was very hard to get fired. But that's why this story of Dragi Katanic is so interesting. In many ways, he was an ideal average worker of communism. To use the terminology of today, in many ways he won the oppression Olympics, and he was supposed to be the ideal victim that communism was now saving from oppression. He was born in Serbia, in Kraljevo, during the war. And why was he the ideal victim? Well, both his brother and sister actually died as a result of fascist terror. I was unable to find a picture of him, so here is how I imagine an average Serbian worker in the 1960s. So both of his his brother and his sister died as a result of fascist terror. His father had a severe PTSD from being tortured by the Germans, and he also had a broken arm. And in the 1960s, Tito decided to liberalize the Yugoslav economy and actually allow Yugoslav factories to fire people. In the long term, that was necessary for the prosperity of the Yugoslav economy. Many communist systems actually in the long run suffered from being unable to fire workers, and that's why Tito decided to liberalize. And Katanic was a victim of a bad situation in Yugoslavia at the time. Throughout the 1960s there was severe inflation happening, and also many people lost their job. But in the 1970s the economic situation actually stabilized. And also in one other very important way, Katanic was supposed to be this ideal little guy of communism. He was supposed to be the one that benefits the most from this new system. His brother was an udarnik. Udarnici, they were the equivalent of the Soviet phenomenon of Stakhanoviites. They were named after Alexei Stakhanov, a worker born in Donbass who broke the record in coal production. He managed to produce 14 times the amount of coal that Stlinist bureaucracy deemed necessary. And that's how he became a hero of the Soviet Union. He became suddenly a celebrity. His face was on every poster. And he truly did believe in creating this new utopia for the workers, which is why he worked with great enthusiasm and managed to produce 14 times more coal than an average worker. And I do want to tell you something about his life story, a small digression, because he did have a fascinating life story, and there needs to be a movie made about him. So he suddenly became a Soviet celebrity, Alexei Stakhanov. He met Stalin, shook his hand. Suddenly he no longer had to live in Donbass. He now lived in Moscow. He was provided with an apartment in Moscow, and he was just took to go all around the country by the party bureaucracy, and he was shown as this ideal worker. But unfortunately for him, he lost his first wife. It was hard for her to abandon all of her friends from their hometown. So his first marriage was broken, and he lost many of his friends, who now became jealous of him. But he was able to meet this new girl. He fell in love with her because she was super good looking, but he actually eventually realized that she's with him just because he's a celebrity, and that's why he became an alcoholic, and he actually died at the age of 70 from alcoholism. And before he died, he was actually awarded the Medal of the Hero Worker of the Soviet Union by Khrushchev. But okay, I digress. So this same phenomenon of ideal workers that worked more than they needed, essentially produced more than they needed because they truly believed in this new ideology, that same phenomenon existed in Yugoslavia. And one of the funniest stories about communism is about this dude Alia Sanovich, so a Yugoslav equivalent of Alexei Stahanov. He managed to shovel like 10 times more coal than he needed. And he was then brought to meet Tito, who asked him, "What do you want? I will reward you." And Sirotanovic answered, "Give me a bigger shovel." So that's how fanatical he was in his belief in building a new utopia. And this guy, Dragi Katanic, one of his brothers, was an udarnik, a guy that worked more than he needed, that also became a celebrity. So from all aspects, this guy won the oppression Olympics in a way. He was the ideal man, and now he was fired because he criticized his boss for having too much privileges in a factory, and he was fired. And the local Serbian bureaucracy did not want to give a job to this guy Katanic now because they hated him. So he wrote a letter to Tito, and Tito at the time actually wanted the people to write letters to him because he was engaged in a power struggle with Yugoslav bureaucracy. In 1966, Tito discovered that his own secret services, Rankovic, this guy you can see sitting alongside Tito, he realized that his own secret services are spying on him, and that's he decided to wage what could be seen as a war against bureaucracy, and he actually encouraged the workers to complain about bureaucracy in Yugoslavia, and he presented himself as if he was not a part of the system. Tito, in his speeches throughout the 1960s especially, used to say, yes, the system is corrupt, yes, it is not working for an average guy, but I'm trying to help you, and this civil bureaucracy is not letting me. They are not letting me help you, they are misinforming me, that's why you need to write letters to me. And what Tito did was kind of ingenious by this propaganda move. So when people wrote to him and said, it is inflation, we can't buy coffee, while these fancy bureaucrats, we see them every day drinking coffee, Tito would then just send like a few kilograms of coffee to the guy that wrote him a letter, because he was unable to prevent the economic crisis, but he was able to help those that wrote to him, at least. And that's how he managed to save this myth that in monarchies was often called "if only the emperor knew" myth. The myth essentially claimed that everything bad is happening because the emperor doesn't know about it, and he even often became a godfather to those workers that worked more than they needed, the udarnici phenomenon. He became a godfather to their children and gave them a fancy watch as a sign, like probably for other people in the village to know, well, now they have a special connection with the great dictator and don't mess with them. And also, surprisingly, Tito, even when people that fought for the side of fascism wrote to him and said, "Can you please tell us where are the bodies of our family?" Sometimes he would actually ask the army to tell him, and then he would reply. And in that way, he was sending a message that now he is truly this good emperor for all the people of Yugoslavia, not just those that fought on his side, but yes, he was definitely more ready to help those that actually were from the families that fought for his side. And yes, as I already said, this idea that the good emperor is trying to help, it existed in the Russian monarchy during the famines. I'm not talking about Stalinist famines, I'm talking about the 1892 famines in the Russian monarchy. And Stalinist famines are kind of the echo of that old phenomenon that existed in Russia for a long time. But yes, in the case of Tito, what's unique, he was actually, let's say, smart enough to actually turn this myth into, I'm not going to say reality, but something approximating reality. He truly was helping the people by sending them money, coffee, or food. And in this case, Dragomir Katanic asked him to give him a job. And actually, what's bizarre about this story, this conversation between Tito and Katanic finally did happen in 1967, the same year in which Katanic wrote to Tito and complained, like, "I'm a working class man, why can't I have a job? I do have a broken arm, but still my brother and sister died under fascism. I'm supposed to have a job now." And Tito then called the leader of the Serbian bureaucracy and told him, well, find this man a job, but he also said, but don't fire anybody else just to give this guy a job. And what happened is kind of bizarre. Local bureaucracy now began to hate Katanic even more because he complained about them to Tito. And for a year and a half, actually, this guy was unable to get a job because the bureaucrats would always reply to Tito and say, well, there are just no positions available. But eventually, after 2 years of not having a job, after the conversation with Tito, after 2 years, this guy finally got a job because this girl, Latinka Perovic, became a leader of the Serbian Communists. She was a bit more, let's say, pro-Tito, in that aspect at least. Maybe she was just a better person, and she managed to give this guy a job at a factory. And now finally he was actually happy, and if we are to believe his last letter, he sent a letter to Tito and said, I'm really happy about my new job, everything is great, and you restored my faith in communism. And he also said, I'm sure that a country with such a great leader will never break apart. Now, maybe he was kind of lying because he thought that Tito wanted to hear it, but again, this guy was raised and educated under communism, so I don't think that he was necessarily lying. And what's bizarre about this story is that in our world today, at least in liberal countries, this type of connection, this idea that the president of the country is supposed to directly pull a connection and give you a job, today that would be corruption, that would be nepotism, and that would be illegal. But in communism, that was seen as the ultimate act of goodness done by the great dictator, giving you a job because you asked him directly because you begged him directly to provide you with a job. And what's even funnier to me is that Katanic ends his touching last letter to Tito, in which he says, yes, you in the same way as you won against the fascists, now you are winning against this evil bureaucracy that is trying to ruin our country and steal money for themselves. And he said, if you are free, if you have the time, come to my home village and will drink a bottle of rakia, essentially the equivalent of vodka for the Yugoslav people. Okay, that's all for this video, and I really enjoyed reading about this crazy story, so I wanted to share this story with you.